Good morning, Munchkins. Now, I want to start off by saying this. If you're reading this rant, all the underlined items are hyperlinked, so you can go do a deeper dive on those topics. Okay, and then a word from the sponsor, of course. If you like what you hear, hit the share button. If you love what you hear, hit the subscribe button. That helps me to do a lot more of these. All right, let's hop into the rant. I guess I was around 8 years old when I developed a curiosity around the names of places. I began to realize that many of the main streets in my hometown of Portland, Oregon, were named after the city's founding fathers. I developed a curiosity around the backgrounds of these people. I mean, who were these people, right? I wondered what they had done to warrant having a street named in their honor. I was very fortunate to have attended grade school in the 60s and early 70s when the public school system taught not just national history, but local history as well. So I was fascinated to learn that the Bonneville Dam was named after General Benjamin Bonneville, that Mount Hood was named after Admiral Samuel Hood, that Seattle was named after Duwamish Indian chief Sahai, Seattle, that Mount Rainier was named after Rear Admiral Peter Rainier, that Charbonneau State Park was named after Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, who was the son of Sacagawea, or that San Francisco was named after St. Francis of Assisi. There is a beautiful statue of St. Joan of Arc in Portland, not far from my childhood home. When I was in the 7th grade, I became curious to learn about the beautiful young heroine on the horse carrying the flag on the statue. And wow, what an entertaining and educational and inspirational education I received from that bit of intellectual curiosity. I learned the miraculous story of how a teenage farm girl from France became the leading general of the French army, saving her entire country at the age of 16 and eventually becoming a canonized saint. Folks, this is so improbable as to defy imagination, but there it is. It actually happened. On our many driving vacations, your grandmother loved to call out the mountains in our geography. Mount St. Helens, named after Ellen Fitzbert, who held the title of Baron of St. Helens. The Three Sisters, which stands for Faith, Hope, and Charity. Each of the mountains is named. One's faith, one's hope, one is charity. People here don't even know that stuff, right? Mount Jefferson, that's President Jefferson. Mount Adams, named after President Adams. Mount Shasta, Shasta Indian tribe. My mom's motto was always be learning. If you would like to take an inexpensive education that will simultaneously entertain you beyond your wildest dreams, take the time to look up the personalities that grace the names of the buildings, mountains, and cities. Wherever you live, you'll get a fantastic education that won't cost you a dime. As an additional bonus, the life stories of these people are worthy of a movie, but not the kind of movie that Hollywood produces these days, but that's a different rant. And that brings me to Cincinnati. So I was on a business trip that took me to Cincinnati about 15 years ago. And while on that trip, I began to wonder if Cincinnati was named after the great Roman general Cincinatus. Of course, I did a little research, and I was thrilled to learn that Cincinnati did indeed acquire its name from the great Roman leader Cincinatus. I've been cogitating on how I might structure a rant on Cincinatus ever since. So here goes the rant. Before launching into the core of this rant, there are a couple of concepts involving morality that I would like to keep you in mind as you read this rant. Let me begin with a quote from British philosopher Lord Acton. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This has to go down as one of the most profound observations regarding the governance of nations to have ever been uttered. The list of nations that have been destroyed by a leader's quest for unlimited power is endless. Pol Pot's Cambodia, Romania's Ceausescu, China's Chairman Mao, Germany's Hitler, Castro's Cuba, Gaddafi's Libya, Venezuela's Chavez, and North Korea's Kim Il-jong are all on the short list. I tip my hat to Lord Acton. The other concept involves the king of the vices, pride, and the king of the virtues, humility. The proud never willingly walk away from power. The humble always walk away from power. The American model of leadership requires men to willingly walk away from power. Having said all of that, now we're ready to learn about the great Cincinatus. Lucius Quintitius Cincinatus was a man of tremendous virtue. Cincinatus may have been the first leader in history to have ever willingly walked away from power. Cincinnatus was a farmer who lived in Rome in the 5th century BC. In 458 BC, Rome was in a state of weakness and was attacked by a neighboring tribe, the Achaea. In a state of desperation, the Roman Senate searched high and low for someone with the leadership skills and loyalty to the principles of the Republic, who they could assign the powers of dictator to run the state and get Rome through this military crisis. But the person they were searching for had to possess a critical attribute. He had to be someone who would willingly step down from power once the crisis was over so the government could continue as a republic and not a dictatorship. The farmer Cincinatus was a man known for his integrity and virtue, so he was asked to serve as dictator and defeat the Achaea. He mobilized the army, defeated the Achaea in less than 3 weeks, and after defeating the Achaea in less than 3 weeks, now that was amazing enough. But what he did next was even more amazing. Rather than stay on as dictator, he willingly resigned the position and returned to his farm. Cincinatus valued his civic duty to the republic more than his selfish desire for power. There are about 2,000 years that separate the time of Cincinatus from the time of George Washington. And in that time period, I'm not aware of a single leader who walked away from an opportunity to maintain absolute power. Cincinatus saved the republic not once but twice. He saved it militarily by beating the Achaea, and then he saved it morally by defeating himself. He defeated human nature, stayed humble, and walked away from power. Cincinatus defeated the king of the vices, pride, with the king of the virtues, humility. It will be 2,000 years before another leader repeated that feat. This takes us to our first president, George Washington. Like Cincinatus, GW was a farmer. Like Cincinatus, he was called upon by the civic leadership to take on the role of leading an army in battle. Like Cincinatus, he defeated the enemy in battle. Like Cincinatus, he willingly stepped aside after serving his time as president. There were calls from many to make him king for life. There were no term limits, and he was immensely popular, so there was no doubt that he could have essentially been made president for life. But in the interest of the republic, GW stepped down and returned to his farm. Like Cincinatus, he defeated the king of the vices, pride, with the king of the virtues, humility. For both GW and Cincinatus, the external enemy was a foreign invader, but the internal enemy was pride, and both emerged victorious, wielding the virtue of humility. When British King George III heard that GW was willingly stepping down as President of the United States to return to the farm, he was reported to have said that if GW steps down, he'd be the greatest man in the world. At that time, King George was certainly the most powerful man in the world. To have the world's most powerful man make such a statement about a former opponent gives insight into the tremendous character it takes to walk away from power. We know George Washington for his tremendous exploits and military victories. We know him from his famous crossing of the Delaware, the siege of Boston, the Battle of Long Island, and Battle of Yorktown. We know him from developing an army out of a ragtag group of farmers during the miserable freezing winter at Valley Forge, where he lost about 20% of his troops to disease and exposure. We know him for the Battle of Trenton, and we know him for winning the Battle of Princeton. But as important as those military victories were, it can be argued that the most important gift he gave to the nation was his willingness to freely relinquish power. As general, he was always careful to defer the Republican principle of civilian control of the military. He didn't have to do that, just like his hero Cincinatus. In Tolkien's epic novel Lord of the Rings, only Master Samwise, Bilbo, Gandalf, and Galadriel were able to willingly walk away from the One Ring. Isildur couldn't let it go, and Smeagol couldn't let it go. At the end, even Frodo couldn't willingly let go of the Ring of Power. Here's an interesting aside. When Jesus was undergoing his 40 days of temptation in the desert, one of the key offerings from Satan was ultimate power. Lucifer offered him all the kings of the entire world, but of course Jesus declined the offer. Satan made the ultimate pitch. I'll give you everything if you'll just worship me. Isn't it interesting that the thing the king of evil craved most from Jesus was power? The quest for power must be hardwired into our sinful nature. Hey, I'm just guessing here. Remember, I'm no theologian. I'm certainly open for discussion on that point. America's rise or fall will always be directly tied to her ability to produce leaders who are willing to adhere to the moral code. In all of history, I can only think of two men who were able to willingly walk away from power. Cincinatus walked away from being a Roman dictator, and his commitment to civic duty and his humility led Rome to become the most powerful, successful, and influential nation in ancient history. George Washington walked away from power being an American dictator, and his commitment to civic duty and his humility led America to becoming the most powerful, successful, and influential nation in modern history. There are three concepts upon which our nation rests. The first is that our form of government is a constitutional republic. The second is that our economic system is free market economics. The third is that we adhere to the Christian moral code. Each of these concepts are important, but the first two cannot exist in the absence of the last one. No moral code means no constitutional republic. No constitutional republic means no free market economics, and the result is anarchy. George Washington and General Cincinatus, I salute you. Once again, we learn that we are standing on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. Peace out. Ciao.